hot springs, wonderful hot springs where you could go to bathe and work. Are we going to start?
Yes, please. You tell me when you want to play, okay?
Well, I'm ready. Calvis, are we okay?
We are okay, and then we are live.
Okay, good. Okay. So let's get started here, basically. What I want to do is, the idea here is that we want to look at brain science, and we're in the process of creating some games to help people understand how what we're learning about brain science affects culture, gender, social environments, and so on. So what's happening in the field is that neuroscientific research is looking at how does culture shape our brain structures, how does our unconscious mind function, what are the cultural differences that occur in how we think and perceive, and what's the embodied nature of culture and mind. And this is going to be my starting point. And of course, then we have the question of how does perception and bias affect our cognitive architecture. By the way, Joseph Scholz has a brand new book coming out. He's one of the leaders in the process of looking at brain science and culture. So I'm happily dependent on him for some of the ideas here, and you'll hear about other folks. I think that those of you who are involved in the social sciences, sounds like most of the people in the group are somewhere involved there, realize that we've gone through a whole mess of different stages in looking at things. A positivist stage. Oh, by the way, anybody, I'll give you my email address at the end of this. Anybody who wants the slides, I'm happy to send a link to you where you can download them when we're all done, okay? And by the way, I'm eminently interruptible, so if somebody has a question or a concern, Eleanor will give you the microphone, or Calvis will give you the microphone, and just interrupt me, and we'll respond as best we can. So I'm looking at all of these things, and what's happened is all of these are now affected by the research that's being done in cognitive science and neurobiology and so on. So I'm not going to go into these in any detail. Those of you who are in social science already are familiar with these turns in how social science has been developing. The big thing that's happened here, I think, is that we're dealing with a release from the dichotomous approaches to human nature. You know, for centuries, we've been talking about body and soul, mind and matter, spirit and physical reality, and so on and so forth. And the fact of the matter is that this dichotomous look at human nature is now giving way to what we call human and cognitive integrity, that there is a oneness to who we are. Yes, there are various dimensions in how we function, and we can label our processes and behaviors, but it's not like we're two different things matched together. Huh? The angel and the beast, as we often see this represented in these various dichotomous things. So I'm going to say something really weird right now, and you can react if you like. Whoop. Well, sorry. This is not working very well. Okay. What we're learning is that culture is not just socially learned, but geographically influenced, genetically inherited, and neurally enabled. And what I'm showing you here is a second of the leaders in the field of dealing with neuroscience and culture. And that's May Nguyen, whose new book just came out last month called Cross-Cultural Management with Insights from Brain Science. And it's the most thorough discussion to date of how brain science affects culture, not just individual identity or social identity, but organizational identity and group identity and so on. And one of the scary things we're learning, of course, is that culture also has impact on genetic development. And this is kind of scary because, you know, we've been through the difficult issues of bias and prejudice and genocide and so on because people are different. So we need to appreciate this, understand it, and be extremely careful about it. So my crazy statement comes up now, and that is, what's the matter here? Culture is meat. Okay. Now, I know that's a crazy statement, but the fact is that it's true, but it's really maybe a different cut. Am I nuts to say this? Are you going crazy about in your head about what I'm just saying? You're hungry? Well, we'll talk about that, but at any rate, what we're learning is that culture is really resident in the neural connections of each one of us, and that means that it lives in us. We are culture, and yet it's a living, changing kind of thing, affecting various aspects of society, personal development, physical health, genetics, and so on. So this is what we're coming up with. So my best way of saying this is that our culture is ourselves, a living, breathing, feeling, acting, relating, physical reality in each of us that is shared in our interactions with each other. So one of the symbols I made of this here is that, you know, it's knowledge, it's feelings, it's actions, it's our solidarity and our groupings and so on. So we're not just the empty identified. I like the Magritte picture for that. Now, if I were there, I'd walk up to one of you and say, you know, very interesting here. It seems like nobody's talking in this room. But if you had a little volume button on your forehead and I could turn it up, what I would discover is that you're talking to yourself probably saying, get out of my space, or I don't know. You might be saying, well, I saw that picture of meat and I'm hungry and so on. The fact of the matter is cultural narrative arrives in the various contexts in which we find ourselves. And what makes this interesting is that culture speaks to us. It's in the process of our neural connections. And the fact is that you're talking to yourself at least 8 times as fast as I'm talking to you, or we speak out loud to each other. And this speaking inside of ourselves, talking to ourselves, is really what's called listening. I know we've learned things in our educational process about active listening and listening to each other. But the fact is that our system itself is bringing up all kinds of interpretations to what's going on around us. It may be, you know, you're listening partly to me and you're listening to the fact that the room is too cold or too hot. You're listening to your stomach growling for lunch. And we're constantly asking ourselves, with every stimulus that comes, what is this? What's happening? What should I do about it? So this ongoing process is extremely, extremely important for our survival. It's a natural process that goes on all the time. And, you know, sometimes it's dreaming when we sleep. And sometimes we try to just do a little meditation and not listen to it very much. But that's also part of the process. So one of the big things we have in the intercultural field at this moment is the question about how do I escape from the old-fashioned double sense of humanity, essentialism, which says this is this and this is this, and these people are like this and these people are like this, and so on and so forth. So the escape from essentialism basically lies in the fact that our minds are plastic. They can change, they can grow. So it's the answer is in the human cognitive system. I put these little children's clothing up here because you'd probably say today, okay, if you were buying these things, the pink one would be for girls and the blue one would be for boys. And that's only about 60 years old. Previously, pink used to be for boys and blue used to be for girls. But how we create a meta-narrative about what belongs to genders is part of the kind of cultural process that becomes neurally embedded. And it's among the meta-narratives, the story we tell ourselves about what reality is. So a quick little video here. Tell me if this is working and you can hear it.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
Okay, that's the simplest presentation I have seen of that. Now I'm going to ask you the question, what do you see here? Answers, please. A birch tree, yeah, what else? Okay, other people, what do you see? How many people see a parrot? Aha, okay. I'd like you to look carefully at this because it's not a parrot, it's a guy. Okay, look here, here's a foot, here's a leg, here's another leg and a foot, here's a hand holding him up, and here is the other arm wrapped around his head, his mouth, his nose, his eye, and so on. Good paint job, no?
Wonderful. It's like those with shoes, right?
Yeah. So what happens here is that our mind gives us an automatic interpretation of what is most familiar to us. And somehow we have to switch the foreground and the background in order to see what else is there, or what's really there, and so on. And so perception is challenged by the fact that we have stored perceptual frames for things, and which we classify things automatically and sometimes negatively when it comes to other people, simply because of what we see. So this ability to question our automatic interpretations is an important part of our capacity to create neuroplasticity, or use our neuroplasticity better. So I've got one more picture here for you, which I'm going to look at. And again, I'm going to ask you, what do you see? Interpretations, please. What do you see?
An egg and French fries.
An egg and French fries. What do you feel when you see that? Does that look tasty to you?
For me, not. The color is a bit not tasty.
See. Okay. So
It is a dessert. It's a dessert.
It's a dessert?
Yeah, then it's tasty.
Why is it a dessert?
Because there is cream or something, then there is a peach on top of it, and that thing there that looks like fries is like pear or apple or something.
Right. Now, those of you who found the egg and fries appetizing, maybe you don't find this very appetizing, but those of you who are vegetarians or vegans or just like this sort of stuff, all of a sudden, from a non-appetizing picture, it turns into an appetizing picture. Okay? What I'm trying to say here is that when we look at things, it's not just identification, but what we taste and feel and smell are all operative in this automatic interpretation we get of things. And once again, if we look in the background or look in a different perspective of these, we will see that our feelings, interpretation are also there. One of the things, for example, I do a lot of teaching and negotiation. And one of the things that happens frequently is that the shape of the room or the shape of the table or the context or the temperature of the room has a far bigger influence on whether people come to agreement or not, given the situation, the context in which it happens. So it's not all about just positivist cultural values, but context. And this is one of the things that Mai Gwynn says in her new book, is that context is the software of the mind, sort of contradicting the old statement, which was culture is the software of the mind. How culture expresses itself depends on the context in which we find ourselves. So this is a very interesting situation, of course, because we need to look at what things are like. And I don't want to go into this in great depth, but just a couple of little fun questions. This woman is likely to be a terrorist, wearing a veil, a Muslim. What's your guess?
Wearing a veil.
Wearing a veil. Okay. Anybody see any of the other things there?
A Muslim.
A Muslim, okay. Anybody else see anything else there?
I see B, wearing a veil.
Okay, so essentially, you guys are right. She's wearing a veil, but she happens to be a Greek Orthodox nun using her prayer beads in a rally in Athens about 8 or 9 years ago. I'm doing a couple of these just so you get a feel for what it's like to explore how your automatic responses tend to give you a pretty firm definition of things. Let's do another one. This woman is smoking a pipe. She's an opium addict. she's violating Chinese norms for women's behavior.
Sorry, what I'm seeing, I think it's B, an opium addict.
Okay.
Opium addict.
I think C, violating Chinese norms.
B, an opium addict.
Okay.
Version B, yes.
B. I think something smoking a pipe.
Okay, so our answer is she's smoking a pipe. The photo was taken in Laos. This is not to prove you. This young woman, for example, is carrying a shoulder bag. She's confused or she's dressed immodestly.
Carrying a shoulder bag.
Okay.
She's just carrying a bag.
Okay.
A bag.
Okay. You're getting it. You're getting
Confused.
it. Okay. She's carrying a shoulder bag. She's a model, actually, wearing
For me,
model
she's
wearing
confused.
fashion items. So what happens here? I'm not going to do any more of this, but this is the big picture. The way we work and what we're learning about brain science and culture is we get an input, we get a stimulus. It might be something physical, it might be something we see, it might be something someone says, it might be our perception of someone, and that cues our own filters, our own frames, what we've learned in our story, our history, and our experience. It reflects maybe the stereotypes that other people have given us, generalizations that we've learned. It reflects what our culture sees and doesn't see in a situation, whereupon we automatically make assumptions that we can act and react and behave according to as we go forward. One of the big words these days in intercultural and diversity work is this business of cognitive bias. And at least in English, I do not like the term cognitive bias because most time when people hear the word bias, it sounds like an accusation. But what we're really dealing with is how the human mind normally functions in giving us immediate ideas about what something is, and it's something there. It's there to help us survive and succeed in the context and in the environment in which we find ourselves. So I like George Lakoff has given us the term frame. We automatically frame things, and I like that a lot better than cognitive bias. I'm not going to change that term. Obviously, it's so popular that everybody's using it, but I'm making this note because sometimes the words we use are heard by people automatically as being accusatory and often create resentment rather than, if you say you're biased, it means you have a leaning toward one idea rather than another. But what you hear is I'm no good because somebody says I'm biased. So this is a normal, natural part of our process. And the other part of it is that we need to look at how we work, how we function in the process, and how we can master our cognitive integrity in a better way. So the other item that I mentioned earlier is the fact that our genes are affected by traumatic incidents, often for a generation or two. So people, for example, who went through the Holocaust, their children will often be affected by the deep impact that made on their lives. If somebody's had a terrible accident and so on, or something enormously good has happened to people, that may be reflected in a genetic tendency that will articulate itself and realize itself in certain contexts. So, for example, our choice of fashion, okay? Now, I look at those torn jeans and I say, gee, don't they have enough money for new jeans? And what they're saying is, hey, that's stylish to have those destroyed jeans on my backside. One other comment, socially speaking, here that I'd like to make is that we are aware of how deep impact technology and digital reality is having on us. Some folks put together this picture of a person called Mindy. And Mindy is a person who is how human beings would develop if they continued to live with their iPhones, that actually our bodies and our systems would reflect this sort of thing. A hunched back, hands that are normally clawed rather than relaxed, the degree of elbow that we tend to have, a second eyelid which would filter out the blue from digital screens, a part of our skull to give us a smaller brain for parts that we don't use, neck muscles to hold up our head as we look down at our iPhone. Now, one of the things I tell my students when I'm teaching is, I'm 82 years old, okay? Now, I remember when we first got our first telephone, and of course we had to share it with the neighbors. So if you picked up the phone, you heard the neighbors talking, you put it back down, and you kept picking it up till the line was free, and you could ask the operator to dial somebody. So I'm saying to them, what will happen to you when you are 82, and you think back on that antique little thing? You might even have an old iPhone in your closet or in your drawer, and your grandchildren are going to find it and they're going to say, Grandpa, what is this? Because by this time, we will have capacity of embedding electronics in the human brain. It's already started, okay? If you think it's just science fiction, realize that people are already doing certain things like this, hopefully in a positive sense for creating corrections and healing mechanisms for things that are disabled or destroyed in the human system. But, you know, 60 years from now, today's students may also be dealing with a political system that wants to control what's going on in their head and in their actions and so on. Right now we have a sort of external version of this in the Sesame credit, you know, that exists in China, where if you're not socially into the system well enough, you may not be able to travel or buy a train ticket or so on. This is already going on. So I think the extremely important thing for us, particularly as educators, is to realize that this stuff is going on today, and the ethical and social responsibility that we need to have toward these things is just as grave as the responsibility we're beginning to feel about the ecology around us. So, sort of to sum up, I get to our good old friend Anais Nin. We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. And what we need to do is really know who we are and how we're being affected by these things. And in order to take that a little bit further, I don't know how much time we have given the delay, but we want to play a game which we have under development now, a whole series of games on neurodiversity. And how are we on time? What do we need to do here?
I think we can manage. I will give people, I will split them into two groups because there are not so many of them here. Right. And then we will start playing, and I will go check up the timing. And we have to stop. We stop when we stop, right? And if you allow me, while I am distributing people and cards, I would like to give a short introduction to you.
Well, very brief. And what I'd like to do is save 5 minutes for debrief of the game at the end. So once you know the time, let me know, okay?
Sure. Would you please split into two groups, 4 people and 3 people, just sitting around? Well, no, you don't. If you have a good mind, good memory. Here is the game, which belongs to the series of the diversophy games created by George Simons and his associates. Oh, okay, 3 people, yeah, and 4 people here. Usually it's a game. It's a game, so you are supposed to score as much as you can. No. It's okay. 3 people here and 4 here. I give you a stack of cards. What you do is, probably it's easiest, it will be the easiest as we don't have the dice which we need here. You take a card, answer it. If your answer is correct, you keep the card, and the next person takes the card and answers it and keeps the card. If you did not manage to give the correct answer, you don't keep the card. Just lay it on a separate chair, please. And while you start thinking about it, I will introduce George Simons. Here is actually the instruction on the screen. Shall I give the introduction to George? George Simons?
Okay, let people enjoy the game.
Okay, let people enjoy the game.
My website
Said he
and see my file
modestly.
anytime.
Okay, I will introduce to you anyway. Okay, you have cards. You take one card, read the question, and answer it so that everybody can hear, or your group can hear. Not everybody, but my group. Your group, right. If your answer is correct, because some cards have the correct answer on the other side, you keep the card. If your answer is not correct, you do not keep the card. There are some cards that do not give you the correct answer, then you keep it anyway. Each card had a number of points. Points? So technically, the person who gets more points is the winner. And I'll go find out how much time we have. You play in the group, within the group. You don't get something, just discard it. Doesn't matter. We're not playing serious. If true, then you should get it. I don't get it. It's not. It's great. You can go try. Yes, your question, please. We will play for 10 minutes, then 5 minutes debriefing, okay? And then 5 minutes to wind up. Is that okay?
Yeah, there's no wind-up other than just a few debrief questions, so let them play for 15 minutes if you can.
Okay, sure. This one is, what is it? It's share. So you share. So everybody says. Yeah. But if I have choice, you make a choice. If you make a good choice that you made, you keep the card. Think so? Yes. You agree. Okay, I agree. Do you want pictures?
Oh, we keep it. Yeah. Okay. It's in a. So for us. 5 points.
And disgust is developed long ago in our evolutionary history. Does this mean that racism is hardwired into our True or false? I suppose it's false. I suppose it's true.
I thought true.
Yes.
I thought
False.
false. Yeah.
So, then your turn?
My turn again. Okay. This is a
Description
a
again.
description. You have just returned from Turkey to manage a French biotech team in Bordeaux.
What a situation.
Yeah, really. You thought everything was going great until one of your coworkers burst into tears, and the other team members complained to their supervisor that you were being too tough on them. With some intercultural coaching, you decide perhaps you had been too direct, and you would need to adapt to communicate. I agree.
So, and what was this point?
If you in fact the person in this situation, how might you feel or react? Tell your team, and then keep this card. If you were in fact the person in this situation,
I suppose you should keep.
yeah,
Yeah, your
with
turn.
some intercultural coaching,
Yeah, your
you
turn.
decide you've been too direct. So you learn. You learn
So,
from.
Yes.
in the course of human development, culture, the traditions passed from one generation to the next, has largely replaced genes as the source of the survival information we need. I think it's true.
Your turn.
My turn. Okay. Should you not worry that first, even hesitant steps in a new direction, acting in new ways, putting a foot in the door, will incline you to fuller and fuller involvement, true or false? Should you? Okay, neither, yeah. Should you not worry that first, acting in a new way, putting a foot in the door, will incline you to fuller and fuller involvement? I disagree, because sometimes your brain says no. Fuller involvement, you might back off. If I walk in the door, or if I try to go into something that my brain says it's not good for me, it's a bad situation, I don't think I'm going to be involved. I don't, but who knows?
But
What
I
do you think?
suppose that it is necessary to do such steps, because it is a way how you can be familiar with new environment and new knowledge. And
It depends from the person.
So here, look at, this is the question.
You should not worry.
You should not worry that first.
yeah, I should not worry.
Okay. So we say true.
Yeah, and what is it?
It's false.
It's false. So, well, it is not. But you agree? Then,
Oh, I thought it was false.
yeah.
Yeah. But the team,
There was so.
Garlic was a beloved cat of the 22-year-old Chinese business. When he died, his heartbroken owner put him in the freezer until the cloning team arrived and carried him off to be, well, reborn. I matter of garlic is back and the body of his clone. The multinational company that conducted Operation Garlic has already cloned 40 dogs and is working on a horse. To clone or not, what would you do in the owner's place? After
To clone the cat.
no.
It's,
No,
then you
I
get
would
into a
not.
moral dilemma. You get into an ethical moral dilemma, and this is a right. Yeah. So
Wishes
Because this cat, he also looks like your cat, but it will not be
the same.
Yeah,
the same. Yes.
It's not.
So it is not.
yeah, there is a moral dilemma.
Yeah, I do agree.
So our
When a living being is dead, and it's all. It's all.
but isn't that's a cultural
Maybe it's a cultural.
because
Chinese are thinking about the reborn and.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
a good
it's
point.
a good point.
That's
yeah.
a good point. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we keep
Maybe
the
for.
card. We keep the card. Yeah, we keep. Okay. This
Your
one's
turn.
done.
Okay. Diverse risk. You are an Algerian woman who has come to start a new job as line manager in France. You wear the hijab, and since you may run into some prejudice and stereotyping among your colleagues. You have been seen that when people are confronted with difference in the workplace, they seem to lock into misunderstanding and negative assumption. You plan to share stories about your country, upbringing, and culture. Okay. If you were, in fact, the person in this situation, how might you feel or react? Tell your team and then keep this card.
So how would you feel? What's
So,
your opinion?
according my understanding and tradition in my in my family culture, yes, I should respect the tradition of culture in what I am living, yes, and therefore, if I should work in this as line manager, I should communicate with other person, and if it is not person coming from Algeria, if I should communicate with those person like me, then I can use this hijab, yes? But if my clients, because I am line manager, yeah, are all persons, then I suppose I should have neutral dresses. So,
That's your opinion.
a hijab is not acceptable
Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, you do. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Your turn.
Thank you. That's interesting. Oops, here we go. Okay, there are no significant differences between the anatomy of the male and female brain.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay? They are very similar but influenced by culture and environment to appear different. Ooh.
No, there are differences.
Yes, but
According to
the
psychology, no, this right and left sides
But
both
between male,
different.
but between male and female?
Yeah,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
yeah. They both
There are
different.
differences.
Yeah.
But they're also influenced by the
Yes,
by
of
the
course they
culture.
are influenced.
Sure. Women are not given opportunities for science, math, and now they're more encouraged in what we call in the United States STEM, which is science, technology, math. So I think
My
there's-
idea is that anatomy is the same, but how it functions.
Yeah.
But how it functions,
So,
maybe,
but
but
false.
it must be.
So you say false. I think false too. There's no significant differences between.
there's no significant differences, but there are some differences.
I think there are. I mean, I agree with you. I say false. There are significant
So, look.
False. Yes.
So my answer was
we are
correct.
majority.
Minority was right.
Yes.
Because I think that
No, that's what we
there
said.
are
We are
no
majority.
no, but I didn't understand. But yes, but I didn't understand correctly the question.
Oh, yeah, because
So the next one. It's my turn, yes?
No, mine.
Yours?
No,
yes, sure. I just did this.
mine.
We all discussed this. Okay.
We can no longer cast the sex differences debate as nature versus nurture. We need to acknowledge that the relationship between the brain and its word is not a one-way street, but a constant two-way traffic flow.
No.
After reading this card aloud, any team member, including you, may comment on it, keeps this card. So we should
Okay.
comment, but
Okay.
we can no longer.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know the word nurture.
Okay, the way you're brought up.
Nurture, natural.
Nature, but nurture.
Nurture is when your mother or you're nurtured, you're brought up, you're cared for. The way you're treated and cared for. Nurtured. Now, we need to acknowledge
When you're done with the last round, so that
Yes, relationship between the brain and its word is.
It's not one-way street.
Yeah, no.
It's both, yes.
when we finish the round, so that everybody has answered identical number of questions. that would be
Women tend to read between the lines. The women tend to read between the lines and intuit as they process equally well between the right and left hemispheres. Yes? In situation you have been involved with, how has workplace culture been affected by this obsession? Women tend to read between the lines and intuit as they process equally well between the right and left. In situation you have been involved with, how has workplace culture? What does it mean, workplace culture?
Workplace is generally from a male culture. Workplace outside the home. Workplace.
Yeah.
So it's generally been masculine men in the business. So how has the business world, where I see mostly men,
As leader, as boss.
Yeah. What do you think?
Brain guides or impulses, you choose how to act.
Women tend to read between the lines and intuit as they process equally well between the right. In situation you have been involved with, they ask simply how we evaluate our own experience.
Yes.
So if the woman has some impact of all this decision making, yes? No. Women tend to read between the lines and intuit. Yes, women are more intuitive.
the last, when we finish the round, we can do it.
Okay?
Yeah. I think it's been difficult because women are more creative and read between the lines. There's more that we women, because our brains are different and our experiences are different.
But they ask us to discuss how has workplace culture been affected.
Well, women are more creative, they're more nurturing, but there's more care.
It depends, you see, how this has workplace culture been affected by this. It depends on...
We'll start the debrief in about 2 minutes.
Personality of boss.
Oh, that's true.
And maybe...
And I sent you cards that were hard to understand.
It doesn't matter, but it depends.
Well, I think we're finished. In that group, we have a winner who is, raise your hand. Yeah. And in this group, the winner is, and here we have the group who is the winner. And mind you, who is saying that? An American, believe it or not. Debrief, please.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say you got a number of points to become a winner, but anybody who learned anything is a winner in this game. So applause to all of you for working and learning together. Some quick debrief answers. What did you learn? What did you feel about playing this game? What do you think is useful? Any feedback?
Feedback, please. Was it useful? Raise your hands if it was useful. Oh, wait, we really need it. Yes. Was it useful? Yes. 2, 3, 4. Okay. It was not useful. Hands up. It was entertaining. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I've got this one. Some of the ones that were opinions, I think we discussed them, and I thought it was worthwhile to have a discussion and forget the points. I mean, we had a discussion, and you keep the card anyway, so it's part of a discussion with the group. So that kind of takes away from the point thing where you have true or false or whatever. That's more of a competitive team. I prefer a cooperative team in cooperation, and I think you learn more through cooperating and listening to others.
Thank you. That's a very good point in the sense that also it's very cultural. Some groups enjoy the competition and it stimulates the learning more, and other groups feel exactly the opposite, that let's stop keeping points. What's important is what we're talking about here. And it depends on the group and their cultural background and the context, but it's a very good observation. Thank you. Other comments? Reactions?
This is why I told you that it was amazing that an American said that it was the group who won, because normally in the Belarusian audiences, you never, ever, ever get a winner. Nobody ever counts points. And the same is also true for Finland.
Well, I have to tell you, the most competitive group I ever had were U.S. lawyers, for what it's worth. Somebody else has a comment, please.
Yeah, so we thought that actually getting the points is totally a matter of luck which cards you get. But the idea of the game is really good to use with our own students. Okay, we'll be making these available shortly. As I said, there's several games in the series, and if you, that's me again. But you can look at our website very simply, www.diversophy.com, and we'll keep it up to date there on this game. There's over 100 games that we have, various cultural topics. And if you have any questions for me, here's my email address. Any further comments, reactions, feedback?
I think the presentation gave a completely new look and new approach to culture. And I know that you keep developing your understanding of it. And it's really amazing how you managed to do it.
Thank you.
I was just saying I would love to see your curriculum or your syllabus on where you go from here. And obviously this is probably one of the first activities that you do to start thinking about neurodiversity and culture. So I would love to see your syllabus.
Okay, well, I'm sort of a silly bus. I drive in different directions. But
yes.
as I say, I'm happy to share the slides with you, and stay in touch with our website. We update whatever we have there. So that's a good starting point. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn if you like, and I'm happy to have discussions or call back or Skype returns to discuss things. I learn from that as much as I can.
If I have till time, so you said that culture is not just socially learned, but geographically influenced, genetically inherited, and neurally enabled. And I suppose that we have not looked on this geographically influenced. What it's.
Well,
Yes.
I think the interesting thing is that, you know, basically our system, our culture is developed to help us survive and succeed. So if our geography is different, we need different tools or different concepts or different approaches in common to do our best to survive and succeed. You know, if you live in a desert, you have one set of challenges. If you live in the frozen tundra of the north, you have a different set of challenges. And if you live here in the south of France, you have floods to deal with. And if you live in California, you've got forest fires to deal with. You know, and so I guess maybe the better word would be the environment, but I think geography localizes it a bit. So that's basically what I think Mai Gwyn means when she speaks about this. There's more about it in her book.
Okay, but genetically inherited, I suppose it's the most difficult thesis to approve. Huh?
Well, yes, this is the most challenging one, but apparently traumatic, or I should say deeply effective. They don't have to be, traumatic seems to be in the negative sense, but traumatic experiences and powerful experiences will generate influence on the genes in such a way that there will be a proclivity in there for a couple of generations. That's what the research seems to be showing at the moment. And as I mentioned to you, that's scary to me because, you know, we have had so much about racial prejudice and bias and who's inferior and who's superior. And my great fear is that this will be identified and used by people for greedy and political purposes. So yes, I'm concerned about that as well. But it seems like the research is showing up that some things are inherited from the impact of cultural influences and events in life.
Any more questions or comments, please? No. At this point, before thanking George, I would really like to introduce him. Dr. George Simons started his grown-up life as a theologist, as a priest, and he has a doctorate in theology, but then he took a completely different street. He became a Gestalt psychologist, which you have seen and which he uses in his work very successfully. Later on, he diverted again to intercultural communication, and now he's considered to be one of the gurus of intercultural communication in the world. And he's the author and editor-in-chief and the president of his company that keeps developing the games, not only on particular cultures. You can get a game like this on probably each of your cultures, but also on, for instance, business competence. And now, this is the latest one probably, on neuroscience. And the amazing thing about George is that he's really generous with his brain, with his knowledge. He's always there to help, to give a hand, to share, to advise. And if you really have time and desire to go look at his website to see the games, and they work really wonderful, be it in class or in business communities. I've done both. So, George, any more comments, or do we thank you?
Thank you for that. I'm just feeling so bad that I'm missing out on being there because of the flood here.
You should. I told you.
I'm open to whatever you like, and you think that you described me as my life taking big turns, and to me, the changes that I made were natural outcomes, one of the other. So I feel good about it so far, and hope I have a few more years left to do it. I mean, at 82, I keep wondering, you know, what's tomorrow? But I'm also delighted working in new projects. We need a game on Latvia, by the way, if somebody's interested or has students.
I'll get you somebody.
Interested. And I collaborate with university groups to create new games. Steve Crawford was there a little bit earlier. Steve had created migrant games for Finland, and we have migrant games for a number of other countries. We're always interested. We have worked with the University of Dijon and Burgundy, which has given us games about humor. Right now they're working on ecology and sustainable development game. So we're happy to collaborate if you have a game idea or a project that has to do with intercultural matters or social matters. Happy to listen to projects and support you in making things happen. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, George. Thanks. Go have some lunch. Go eat that meat.
Yeah. Brains and scrambled eggs used to be my grandfather's favorite breakfast. So
good.
Take care, everybody. Have a great Congress. I miss you all. Bye-bye.